So, but I think what we want, when we say universal, is we want an expectation. We want, when Sidra's generation is old enough to drink, no, when Sidra's generation hits 40, we want people to get into cocktail parties and restaurants and talk about where'd you serve, and automatically have a conversation building. And if you didn't, I kind of want the people who didn't to look at the floor in embarrassment. I just want it to be something that people feel responsible to other Americans. And so I think that idea that it's a rite of passage and creates an expectation.
All right. Yeah, Sidra again, do you think your generation, based on your experience, would welcome this kind of rite of passage? I mean, with enthusiasm?
Yeah, I think what we spoke a lot about is just what is citizenship. And that's one of the things that we talked about a lot this year in my AmeriCorps year, is what does it mean to be a citizen in the United States? Does it mean that you just go on with your life and you're not interacting with people who are different from you? Are you not exposed to the diversity and the wealth of information in this country given by the diversity of people in here? And I think that our generation is really looking for the opportunity to define citizenship in a new way. And I think service allows us to do that in a sense that, my AmeriCorps team was 10 members from all over the country. And we all got together in Colorado we went to different colleges, had different majors, different backgrounds, and we all had a similar passion for healthcare. And I think that experience is just, for me personally, giving me a new idea of what citizenship is.
And we heard so much about this at the summit, this notion of bringing young people together from very different backgrounds. I mean, we're talking about kids from, 81611 and some zip codes that are at the other end of the moon in terms of opportunity, and having them working together in the same projects and how transformative that really could be. We've also talked about a couple of times about a living wage. What is a living wage? What were you paid to do this?
So our stipend for the year, my service was 10 and a half months, so we got $12,100. So we got paid bi-weekly, and with taxes it was about $440. I lived at home, so I was lucky. But most people lived with other AmeriCorps members, so some people actually lived in Boulder with I Have a Dream, which is a AmeriCorps program focused on dreamers and helping them get into college. And most people who are doing AmeriCorps live on food stamps, which I think is also just a very educational experience going through that process and seeing how it is to live on food stamps for a year. But it definitely is a wage that allows you to, you can go to concerts and you can do things, but it is a sacrifice, which a year of service really should be.
But it is important, though, isn't it, that it is paid, as modest as it is? And you want to just say again why? I mean, we're not talking about volunteering.
Right. And it's important because we want to make it open to all. We want people from, I see young kids in Anacostia who come from the most difficult neighborhoods, who couldn't do a year of national service without a living stipend. And you use the right term, because the stipend, it's not a wage, it's not a job. Part of the sacrifice in the service is actually it's a poverty level stipend. It's harsh conditions, difficult problems, working with people who are of different backgrounds and beliefs. In addition to the public shaming of looking down at your feet, Eric Liu talked about the importance of creating also a badge of honor. So imagine if Sidra is characterized as a civilian veteran, and employers across the country then give her a hiring preference because she did a year of service to her country. Or as she mentioned, it helps her get into graduate school or colleges, maybe even on the common application. We embed it in the culture by saying, what was your full, your service year, and that helps you get into college.
Let me open it up to the audience in the time we have for questions of any of our panelists. I think we have microphones. I've had a chance to talk to these folks for the last couple of days. So, yes, gentleman right here.
Yes, I have two issues. One is a question of how you arrived at a year. I've always thought that a longer period, like 2 years, would be necessary. It doesn't seem very efficient. And secondarily, I don't hear anybody speaking to something I've always felt was incredibly important about this type of national service, which is the maturity that a person obtains before possibly going on to college. How much waste is taking place in the system because that maturity doesn't occur. So I'd be interested in your comments on that. Thank you.
Question.
Well, in terms of the year, look, I'm with you. If we could do 2 years, great. But we have seen actually city year, a lot of the young people do a year, some come back for a second year at a leadership role. We feel like a year is the right minimum amount. It's long enough that it can be transformational, and we've seen it with a number of programs. I mean, you hear from Sidra, she did a year. She is going to be a different kind of doctor. You heard it from her after a year of service. A year full-time. And the other thing is, Sidra didn't tell you, these young people work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. City Hall Corps members get up some at 5 in the morning so that they can be at the schools at 7 a.m. to greet the students, and they stay all the way through after school till 6 o'clock at night, and they'll show up on Saturdays to make sure that their students are doing their homework, etc. It's intensive. So our feeling was a year full-time intensively is enough, and sometimes they'll come back for a second year. So that's on the year. And then your second part of your question was?
I can take that
Okay,
one.
you take the second
We'll
one.
do the tag team.
Sure.
We do a lot of that these days. Basically, the bridge year concept is embedded in our plan. That someone who graduates from high school, a lot of these young people, they don't know which college to go on, they don't know what career they want to pursue, and then you meet somebody like Sidra, who has had an experience in a community, meeting real needs in healthcare. Now she's going on to one of the finest medical schools in the country, and forever will be a different doctor. I agree with you. Our plan says at least 1 full year of civilian national service. The Peace Corps is 2 years. And we just did a representative survey of the 200,000 Peace Corps volunteers who've served over the last 50 years, and the effects on going into public service, the State Department, diplomacy, nonprofits, starting their own organizations. The transformative effects are really significant, even with that 2-year experience.
Yes, over here, or no, right here, please. I can't see with the lights.
My question is just based on the plan or the strategy, because Sidra's been in AmeriCorps. My son was in Teach for America. But I never heard of these programs until they told me they were going to apply for them. So my question is there a plan so that the everyday citizen even knows these programs exist?
Very important question.
Yeah, I will. It's a great thing. One of the things we learned in the military is you actually recruit parents. So you get a young person interested in service, but the most effective recruiting is you have to go to the parents and you have to convince the parents the child is going to be well treated, is going to be safe, is going to learn something and whatnot. And particularly during war, that's tough, but it's important. And that means you've got to educate America. You've got to tell them about all these different programs. Right now, I'd say that people, as Bridge said at the beginning, the people who know about AmeriCorps or Teach for America is a pretty small elite part of America. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for it to be known to everybody so that it becomes much more of an opportunity to every American. And we'd really like to see, as Bridge mentioned, when information goes out, people get either a brochure or thing that says, here's a menu of national service. On one end is military service, 5 different services, and then all of these others. And there's probably one that fits you, and hopefully people would, do some research and select what they want.
But we hope very much that the Franklin Project will help communicate about these programs. Jane Harmon? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a recovering politician. And I'm also proud to be a trustee at the Aspen Institute, among other activities. But I recall that in Congress there was not a huge group, but a group of people who had Peace Corps backgrounds or military backgrounds, and those people brought experiences to Congress. I know what we all think about Congress, but it isn't bad every single day of the year. And they brought experiences that were hugely transformative for the rest of us. And it occurs to me, just thinking forward, Sidra, that when you are in Congress and you're a medical doctor and you've had this national service background, that you will transform a lot of the people that you serve with. And so, 2 comments. One, have you mobilized the folks in Congress who have these backgrounds behind this idea? I know that, for example, Charlie Rangel, who was a veteran of World War II, was the guy who originally introduced this, and it's been languishing there for 25 years. I'm sure you have a more updated version of the national service idea, but nonetheless, he's been pushing his rock up a hill for ages. But have you mobilized the folks with the Peace Corps backgrounds and others behind this idea? And second of all, have you mobilized, this occurs to me too, the people who are doing this kind of service to consider running for public office? If we want to fix Congress, we have to fix the people in it. And it seems to me that people who care about this would be much better legislators than the folks we presently have.
Wonderful. I'll take the first if Alan takes the second.
Sure.
Which is, Jane, one of the powerful aspects of having this initiative at Aspen is that former Congressman Dan Glickman, Secretary of Agriculture, beloved on the Hill, through the congressional program, convened a briefing the other day on the Franklin Project. And Stan was very wise. He said, initially, let's keep this out of politics. Let's have this emerge from the American people and not have it caught in the ideological battles. But I can tell you, when I went up to brief on the Franklin Project, members of Congress were jumping out of their chair. We've had requests, Senator McCain, on a bipartisan basis, we're looking to form a gang of 8 or 10. And we're also identifying, as you just suggested, the former, the veterans, Peace Corps volunteers. And if you're willing and if you have time, we were actually going to come see you and ask you to help us organize the right members of Congress.
What happens when you ask a question?
To get behind this, and I hope you'll say yes.
Yes, we'd love and welcome your leadership, Congressman Harmon. You've had such a distinguished career. I know you're so well respected on both sides of the aisle because of the way you operate in a bipartisan way. And just to build off of what Bridge said, and we do need to do that. And I think, and you're right, because Chris Shays was at our gathering, and he was in the Peace Corps, and he's been, pushing this effort literally going back for 20 years now because of his experience. In terms of, and you're also right, we do need to get young people like Sidra to think about running for office. I mean, Stan has this great vision. Imagine if we get to a point in America where if you're running for office and you haven't served, people wonder, well, why are you even running? Just imagine if that has to become a qualification even to run. Where have you served your country? The military, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Teach for America, et cetera. And there's a new organization actually started by a good friend of mine, Emily Cherniak, called New Politics, where she was in AmeriCorps, and she's come to your vision actually, which is we got to get some of these folks who've served the country to start running for elected office because they're problem solvers. When you've served in the military, when you've served in the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, you don't ask, what are your political views? You got to solve a problem together. Whether it's running a health clinic, running an after-school program, working in a school, or fighting in Kandahar. And if you talk to the members of Congress and you know them who've been in the Peace Corps, they tend to be the problem solvers. They tend to be more bipartisan. They tend to look beyond the extreme ideology and say, we got to solve problems. So you're right. If we could get to the point where more people who've served our country run for office, and then if us citizens make that a qualification, then I think we will change our country ultimately.
I wager there are probably a few lawyers in this room, and I was just thinking about what we heard yesterday from the head of the ABA, and I wonder if you'd share that as a part of this project.
Well, one of the elements of the plan is what you heard from Sidra, which is the power. Imagine entering a profession, and that part of entering a profession, being a lawyer or a doctor or a nurse or a dentist or engineer, is actually doing a service year early on in your career, and to connect the reality of the problems on the ground with what you become in your profession. I was a former lawyer. I could have used a dose of that. I'd probably still be practicing law. And so we envision, yesterday the head of the American Bar Association stood up and said, we're going to mobilize the nation's law firms, and we're going to work to build on the pro bono practice, but turn this more into a full service year for lawyers. And so when they go into places like these fancy law firms, they will have this experience that will ground them in the reality of ensuring that they also use their skills to help the poor and the needy and the vulnerable and strengthen communities in our country.
Question over on this aisle? Couple. Either of you? Why don't both of you ask a question?
I have a very brief question. This is a wonderful plan. Who's going to pay for it?
I'll take that. We've designed, we understand we're in tough fiscal times. And so we've designed what we're calling a 21st century plan. And the way, this is an American idea. I love the way Stan frames this. It's an American idea, and we believe America should pay for it. So what does that mean? Ultimately, and the way our plan is designed is, there's going to be some government money. There is already for Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, and we believe that those programs should be grown to the level that they can be at scale. There's going to be crowdfunding. The certification system, people mentioned Kickstarter. You know, Kickstarter, after only 3 years, is providing more funding for the arts in America than the National Endowment for the Arts. So we believe if people will support artists, they will support young people like Sidra who say, you know what, I want to spend a year, I just need $12,000 to cover really minimum living expenses. So we ask the American people to pay for it. We're also going to ask the private sector, like this Lawyers Corps. Walter's agreed to go to New York and meet with Jim Silkenat, who's the new president of the ABA, and convene all the major law firms to say, would you help provide the funding for the Lawyers Corps? We're going to look to companies. We're going to look to foundations and philanthropic individuals. So we've tried to, this is a plan that we believe if everybody does their share, that it can be paid for. It is a big idea, but you know, when we care about stuff, we invest in it. And it's an investment. And we actually just did an economic study, and the return on investment for national service is 4 to 1. It's the transformation that you get in young people like Sidra. It's the work they do, the impact of the work they have, but it's also the sense of community that gets built. So it's definitely going to cost money. This is not something that's going to be free, but we feel like if we spread the burden among all different sectors, public-private partnership, and you know, actually AmeriCorps is designed that way. AmeriCorps raises almost roughly $1 in private money for every $1 that the federal government puts up. So there's already a model that this can work.
I give one.
You mentioned artists. I mean, just to show you the power of this, some of you were probably just in Greenwald and heard Yo-Yo Ma. Yo-Yo Ma at the meeting, at the convening that he's now doing with conductors in Snowmass, heard about our summit, called and insisted that he come over because he was so excited about this and feels that it is critical and it's important to get artists involved and engaged. And so he's now going to be a key supporter of this effort going forward too. There's another question.
I think can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I think what you're doing is tremendously exciting, and you're all to be congratulated for driving this agenda ahead. But I wonder if there's not even a bigger idea beyond the big idea. And that is, we have millions and millions of mature people with the aging of America and the baby boomers coming in. And I'm wondering if there's not an opportunity to look to this group of people beyond endorsing and supporting and mobilizing them with some type of formal program, so that they're not a generation of was-its, but you can mobilize their skills, their commitment in some kind of formal program where they can contribute and get a badge of give back available to them, such that there's an actual opportunity here for the people in this room.
Very important.
Can I call it the mature core?
At large.
No, sir, I absolutely agree with you. Here's what we're trying to do with this. We're trying to keep this particular initiative absolutely clear and understandable, so it's bounded. What we don't want to do is make it wide enough where there's a reason for everybody to, you know, there's enough reasons for people to oppose it. We want to keep it narrow, focused in this one, focused on a young generation, focused on that service there. I think there's plenty of room for other initiatives, but I just think that if this becomes too broad, it will become weakened. And so we can get this one up the hill. I absolutely agree in the potential.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, and this is where I really appreciate General McChrystal's leadership, because he has pushed us to stay focused. This is, totally love your concept of a bigger idea, but honestly, the Senate and the House passed the Kennedy Serve America Act, 79 votes in the United States Senate, one of the biggest bipartisan votes in the first term of the Obama administration. They promised to grow AmeriCorps to 250,000 people. They're not keeping their promise. It's only funded at 75,000. It's basically the same level it was when Bridge grew it with President Bush, grew it to 75,000. So even getting that supported, we need to build a bigger movement. But that said, part of what we've said in our plan is, the great thing about this idea is that it then leads to, I can guarantee you that Sidra is going to be serving for the rest of her life. And there are great efforts. There's Encore Service, the ARP's been leading on that, there's Experience Corps. So there are groups, and we've welcomed them, and they're supporting what we're doing. But I've learned from General McChrystal, which is we got to focus, because if we could get this institution set up, it will then spur the country to ask what you asked. Well, why not? We have this great generation to continue to serve. But I've actually changed my mind. I mean, we helped to persuade General McChrystal that that this could be voluntary and that the people would respond. And you convinced me that, you know, we got to stay focused, even if we're going to have any chance of succeeding. It's got to be simple for people to understand. It's a rite of passage for all young people, expectation, and get the country to rally behind that. And if we get that done, everything else I think will flow from that.
Yes, please.
So Alan, is this mic working?
Yes.
Yes.
So maybe Harris and I will go out and start the senior corps.
That's it.
You can get it done, David.
But at any rate, it's an interesting thing observing City Year because our corps members, who are the ones who serve in the schools, and the roughest, toughest schools in every city, make $13,000 a year. And then some of them get food stamps. And yet, they stay on for the first year. If they can do a second year, they do a second year. And if you go up in any of our offices, like in Boston or Chicago or New York, everybody on our staff has done City Year and stays and stays and stays. And believe me, they're not overly paid. So I love what all of you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Another question. We have time for perhaps 2 more questions, and you'll still have plenty of time to walk over and get a seat in Greenwald. Okay, right here.
Well, I congratulate all of you. This has been a passion of mine for the last 40 years or so, and it looks for the first time like it might actually happen. Do you have a time frame involved? I mean, are you thinking in terms of like 2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Sure, maybe I'll take that. And first, it got ignited in a way that was completely transformational a year ago at the Ideas Festival. And thanks to Walter and Elliot, you know, after Stan gave this dramatic, bold new vision, Laura Lauder stepped forward and was a catalyst to make this happen. And our timeline for action is actually pretty quick. We've come together with this plan of action within 9 months. And actually copies of the plan are outside, and anybody who wants to, like you, had a passion for 40 years, sign on to the plan, look at ways in which maybe tapping colleges or nonprofits or others that might want to get certified into the system, that you could help. We welcome and would love to have your support. But our timeline is we just had this summit, which was an Action Foreseen Summit. And out of the summit, we got concrete commitments, one of which was actually to develop the first phase of the national certification system, which we envision launching in early 2014. We also, around 9/11, are going to have a mobilization, a grassroots mobilization tying into your question about marketing and how do we talk about this and how do we attract the next generation, led by young people. And then on Veterans Day, we want to show the nation's support among military leaders and veterans for this large-scale plan. And so that's the vision in the short-term timeline, also working with the government, members of Congress, and making progress already in the announcement of these new agency corps.
Well, I would like to thank our panel. I urge all of you to read the plan and get involved. Thank you.